Thank you for inviting me this morning. I just want to say, firstly, despite Mr. Vulin's kind words about my Serbian, I decided that it would be more appropriate for an event of this international kind, hosted by The Economist, to use my English rather than inflict my Serbian upon you. I think, however, that The Economist does a great job in organising these kinds of events and in encouraging us all to, at the end of the year and looking ahead, to focus on the challenges that are going to face us in 2015 in this case. If I may, I'll talk a little bit about the Svetske Oluja that Mr. Vulin spoke about and how, in the case of the European Union, we are seeking to overcome those and meet those challenges, and then move on to talk a little bit more specifically about some of the challenges here and in this region. But first of all, just to mention one example of the kinds of major changes that we have been facing and that we're certainly going to go on facing in the year ahead. I noticed with particular pleasure the other day that one of The Economist's most well-known journalists, and it so happens a good friend of mine, Edward Lucas, the other day became the first e-resident of Estonia. He was presented with his digital ID card by the Estonian president. And as an expert for The Economist on issues like cybersecurity, I'm sure that Mr. Lucas will be reaping the benefits of this interesting and futuristic move by Estonia, which somebody quipped this week is increasingly being known as Estonia. I think others will no doubt want to follow this kind of example when it comes to wiring, networking, and globally connecting businesses and ideas. Especially against the background that we have, where we still see increasing levels of economic competition even about territory in Europe, or scarce natural resources, and also striving for political dominance. And against that background, I think we're all increasingly aware that we need the European Union in particular and its member states and aspiring member states to rely on joint European action based on shared values. And I think we need to remind ourselves of those shared values as we look forward and seek to tackle the challenges that we all face. Because as the new president of the European Commission, Mr. Juncker, reminded us the other day, it is a union of shared values. They are spelt out in the treaties and in the Charter of Fundamental Rights. And citizens do expect their governments to provide justice, protection, and fairness with respect for fundamental rights and the rule of law. And this was underlined once again only on Tuesday with the conclusions of the European Union's General Affairs Council, which at the same time as underlining that enlargement of the Union remains a key policy, also stressed that enlargement itself as a policy should contribute to mutual benefits of peace, democracy, security and prosperity in Europe. And of course, it's an absolute truth that achieving those goals is going to depend also on achieving a return to economic growth across the continent. And I might therefore just say a few words about how the the European Union sees the economic prospects in the period ahead, especially as the European Commission has recently published its own economic forecast. I think the first point to make is that the European Union and the countries of the European Union are themselves functioning as an integral part of the global economy, bringing obviously vulnerability to geopolitical risks and a huge challenge when it comes to raising competitiveness. And of course, we have the perhaps unprecedented legacy, at least since the existence of the European Union, of the economic and financial crisis, with high unemployment across the European continent, very high debt levels, and low utilization of existing capacity to take on the economic challenges. Obviously, the situation varies considerably across the European Union, across the continent, but the projection, according to the forecast, for GDP growth in 2014 is of around 1.3%. And looking ahead, the Commission forecast sees a gradual improvement picking up during the course of 2015-2016, with a forecast of an increase to 1.5% in 2015 and possibly to 2% in the year after. But of course, that will be totally dependent on the assumption that indeed the legacies of the crisis will fade away, that labour markets will improve, structural reforms will start to bear fruit, and so on. It will also depend on the assumption that internal demand will be the main driver of growth, and that there will be a gradual recovery when it comes to levels of investment, which have been unacceptably low. There is also an expectation that on that basis unemployment should fall to around still high 9.5% by 2016. So all EU economies are expecting to return to a growth level of more than 1%. What can the European Commission do? We have a new European Commission, we have a new President of the Commission with a clear set of new priorities which have been welcomed by Member States. And one particular focus which President Juncker has put in setting the priorities has been on the return to investment. As you will have seen, the Commission unveiled only the other day a new package for investment, which President Juncker described as a kickstart, where the Commission is applying the jump leads. This plan for Europe is based on three major strands, which are designed to be mutually reinforcing. The first is an injection of around 21 billion euros to be taken from the now approved EU budget to be managed together with the European Investment Bank and to offer guarantees to reduce risk for private investment. And the intention is that this should generate over 300 billion euros of primarily private investment over the next 3 years. The investment plan is to give special attention to ensure finance contributes to growth in ways which are adapted to sectors and regions. And thirdly, accompanying measures are to be taken to improve the environment for investment and trigger knock-on effects. The idea here is to provide additional fuel for the EU's recovery, reverse the drop in investment which I spoke about, and to take a decisive step towards meeting the long-term needs of the European economies by boosting competitiveness in strategic areas. But also, it's to be seen in the context of the overall priorities for the new Commission, in particular when it comes to expanding and deepening the single market. And here I would highlight in particular the intention to deepen and consolidate a digital single market, which incidentally was also a key point in Prime Minister David Cameron's speech on EU reform early last year, but also the importance of the energy union in that context, where the key priority is to reduce energy dependency of member states, to diversify energy sources, and to network the continent so that the energy union can really contribute to predictability so essential to growth. And along with that, the idea is to have an energy union with a very strong emphasis on renewable energy and to become the world number one in renewables. I think it's important to set that broader context of some of the key issues for the European Union, because Serbia is already part of the European Union in many respects. I think some key figures demonstrate that very, very clearly indeed. The European Union is the most important trading partner of Serbia, with around 2/3 of total Serbian exchange in trade carried out with the European Union, which dwarfs the trade with other partners. For example, exports from Serbia to Italy or Germany alone are significantly higher than Serbia's combined exports to Russia, China, Turkey, and the US of A. In terms of imports, Europe is also the main supplier of goods and services to Serbia, with a share of over 60%. And companies from the European Union are by far the largest investors in Serbia. If you take the period since 2005, European Union companies have invested 13.5 billion euros in Serbia, which is actually over 3/4 of all the foreign direct investment in Serbia during that period. Quite apart from that, of course, the European Union is Serbia's largest partner as a donor, having granted over 2.5 billion euros during the last 10 years, leaving aside the contributions directly from member states such as Germany. Will, of course, continue to be Serbia's largest partner by far when it comes to donations as well. And I think we see that also with the response to the environmental but also economic disaster which the floods constituted in 2014. And in working with the Serbian authorities on designing the programs for the instrument for pre-accession assistance looking ahead, it is, of course, right that the priority should be overall support to Serbia's accession. But let's not forget that much of the work and many of the projects which have been carried out have also been instrumental in supporting Serbia's efforts to attract foreign investment. I give you examples. The European Progress Project in South Serbia contributed to establishing a technology park in Vranje, where now the Geox Italian company is building a factory which will employ 1,200 people. Another example is the technology park in India, which was funded with the support of the European Union, where the German healthcare firm Fresenius has just started its operations. So we need to bear in mind the direct links between the assistance and the wider benefits that can bring. But of course, very key will be not just such projects, but also working together on creating a better business environment with consistent and predictable legislation and its implementation as well. And this is key. I mean, we're now in a new phase when it comes to the relationship, of course, and the start of negotiations with the European Union means that there will be now ever-increasing joint focus on every aspect of the accession process. But I think very key to this is also the importance of focusing at the very beginning of the accession process on issues such as the rule of law, fundamental rights, fighting corruption, and so on. I'm always heartened when I hear the very strong message from the Foreign Investors Council, FIC, in Serbia, that focus on these areas is obviously important in itself, but also extremely important for creating the sort of business climate and predictability that companies already in Serbia want to see, and companies thinking about investing in Serbia want to see even more. Finally, I would just like to mention what the European Union is doing, not just in Serbia, but in the region when it comes to working with the governments in the region on economic governance questions. This means that increasingly the European Commission is going to be encouraging governments in this region, and in fact a major step forward was taken in this area through the meeting of the Western Balkan Six in this very room at the end of October, when all six governments agreed with the European Commission on submitting their national economic reform programs to the Commission by the end of January 2015. This is an innovation because of the focus now not just on the macroeconomic elements, which has been the case in the past, but basing ourselves very much on the model of the European semester, which applies to European Union member states. There will also be a second element to this, which is about sectoral reform measures and enhancing competitiveness and growth. And there will be attention paid in this very much to key issues such as enhancing physical capital, human capital, improving industrial structures, crucially improving the business environment, and measures to support export promotion and attracting foreign direct investment. This also flows from the joint conclusions of European Union finance and economy ministers in March with their counterparts from this region adopting joint country-specific recommendations, again based on the best practices in member states. And the intention through this increased and more intensive approach on economic governance is that accession countries like Serbia should obtain concrete policy advice, often going beyond the requirements of the European Union acquis communautaire. It will be challenging and it will require the involvement of all of government, but also wide consultation beyond government, outside, with stakeholders, the private sector and civil society. In conclusion, I should like to say that we obviously need to be realistic on the basis of what we have experienced both across Europe and in Serbia in recent years. I think Mr. Vulin was completely right in saying that there will be a difficult period ahead. The extremely important and courageous steps which the government, I think, is taking when it comes to, for the first time, effectively, dealing with the legacy of state-owned enterprises and socially owned enterprises must be welcomed and has the European Union's full support, not just politically, but also through the instruments that the European Union is placing at the Serbian government's disposal. So I wish you, may I take this opportunity to wish you also happy holidays, as prosperous a 2015 as possible, and srečni praznici. Thank you very much.